Have you ever just had that feeling that there's an invisible script running in the background of, well, everything? That our world, our biology, even our own minds are all being guided by these hidden informational patterns? Well, today, we're going to pull back that curtain on those patterns, the invisible architects of our reality.
So let's start with a name we all definitely know, Isaac Newton, the man who gave us gravity, calculus. He basically wrote the rulebook for how our universe works.
He's the absolute bedrock of modern science. And you know the image we have of him, right? This figure of pure, cold reason. The man who saw the entire universe as a perfect, predictable clockwork machine.
But what if I told you that the very same guy spent decades of his life completely obsessed with biblical prophecy and secretly calculated a date for the end of the world? A date that's, well, it's getting kind of close. All right, let's dive into the side of Newton that was deliberately kept under wraps for centuries, his secret obsession with prophecy.
So, you've really got two very different Newtons. On one side, there's the scientific giant from our textbooks. But on the other, you have the secret Newton, the guy who wrote over 1 million words on prophecy and alchemy. And for him, this secret work was just as important, maybe even more so, than discovering the laws of motion.
So how did the greatest scientific mind of his generation land on the year 2060? You'd think it'd be some crazy, complex formula, right? But his math was, believe it or not, surprisingly simple. He picked a starting point, 800 AD, which he saw as a time of corruption in Europe. Then he added 1,260 years, a number he pulled from the book of Daniel. And boom, 800 plus 1,260 gets you 2060.
But here's the massive twist. Just when you think you have him pegged as some doomsday prophet, you find his own words on the subject. He was actually against people trying to set dates for the apocalypse. His whole 2060 calculation wasn't a prediction, it was a rebuttal. He was basically telling all the doomsday preachers of his day, look, the absolute earliest this could happen is 2060, so everyone just needs to calm down.
So how do we square this? The scientist and the prophet living in the same head. Well, for Newton, there was no contradiction at all. He believed he was simply reading two books written by the exact same author. The first book was Nature, governed by God's beautiful mathematical laws. The second was Scripture, which contained God's prophetic laws. To him, figuring out the book of Revelation was a scientific problem, just like gravity was.
So if this was so central to who he was, why haven't most of us ever heard about it? Well, because his family literally locked it all away for 200 years. His beliefs were considered heretical, a little too out there, and his supporters wanted to protect his brand as the father of the Age of Reason. It wasn't until 2003 that the world was truly reintroduced to this completely hidden side of the great Isaac Newton.
Newton was searching for a single divine code. And that quest, well, it points to a much bigger idea, that all complex systems, from our society to the natural world, are running on a kind of hidden operating system. And this is where a field called cybernetics comes into play, pioneered by a guy named Norbert Wiener. His core idea was, honestly, revolutionary. He said that to understand any complex system, don't just look at its physical parts. You have to focus on the information flowing through it, the messages. That's the real blueprint.
Nature has been running its own programs for billions of years, right? From this cybernetic perspective, the real drivers aren't species or individuals, but the selfish genes just trying to make copies of themselves. The organism is just a vehicle for the information it carries. As a famous quote from the 19th century so perfectly puts it, a chicken is just an egg's way of making another egg. The information is running the show.
But wait, if life is just driven by selfish genes, why do we see so much cooperation? Game theory actually offers this beautiful answer with a simple but incredibly powerful algorithm called tit for tat. It's basically a 3-step program for building trust. It works because it's simple, it's retaliatory, and it's forgiving. It's a hidden program for cooperation that just sort of emerges naturally in all kinds of systems.
Okay, so we found hidden programs in our societies and in our genes. But what if we're thinking way too small? What if the universe isn't just described by information? What if it's actually made of it?
Now, this wild idea finds a very strange echo in the reports of explorers of inner space, like the ethnobotanist Terence McKenna. Through his research, he documented these encounters with intelligent entities that he described as being made of living language. He claimed that in these states, language transforms from something you hear into a physical object you can actually see and touch.
This radical idea led him to a pretty profound conclusion. Maybe information isn't just a way to describe reality. Maybe it's the very stuff reality is made of. And if that's true, it totally changes how we see ourselves. We tend to think of our ego, our sense of self, as this solid wall separating me from everything else.
But what if that whole model is wrong? What if the ego is more like a vortex, a stable, self-reinforcing whirlpool in a universal ocean of consciousness? A vortex is made of the exact same water as the ocean. It's not separate. It's just a temporary pattern of flow.
And this brings us right back to Norbert Wiener, who offered this incredible insight. From this point of view, we aren't solid stuff. We are information. We are patterns that perpetuate themselves. We are messages echoing through some kind of cosmic medium.
Okay, so if we just run with this grand theory for a minute, that we are all just informational patterns in a conscious universe, can it help us decode some of life's biggest mysteries? Let's take a look.
Consider this huge scientific puzzle called homochirality. In a lab, chemistry produces a 50-50 mix of left and right-handed molecules. But all life on Earth exclusively uses left-handed amino acids and right-handed sugars. Why? This theory we're exploring offers a pretty radical answer. It wasn't an accident. It was a kind of divine signature, an intentional design choice imprinted at the very dawn of creation.
From the origin of our biology, this theory then turns to the origin of our consciousness. It offers a very bold reinterpretation of the forbidden fruit story, suggesting that maybe it wasn't an apple, but psychoactive fungi that sparked a massive leap in human awareness.
And what about the big one, death? Well, according to this model, it's not an end, but an active, programmed transition. The theory proposes something called a DMT decoupling protocol, where a flood of a naturally occurring chemical in our brains acts as a key. The idea is that this chemical doesn't cause the experience, but it enables it, decoupling consciousness from the physical brain and transporting it to a transitional linguistic realm.
So these are some vast, mind-bending ideas, I know. But they suggest that we are not just observers of the universe. We might be active participants in a reality that's trying to communicate with us, and maybe even through us.
We've journeyed from Newton's hidden prophecies all the way to this far-reaching idea of a universe made of pure information. We've seen how this perspective can reframe everything from the origin of life to the nature of consciousness and death itself. It all leads to one ultimate takeaway. If our universe is a self-organizing, self-communicating system, then everything around us and everything within us is part of a message, which leaves us with one final urgent question. What is it trying to say?